Welcome again to the best day of your week.
Good morning.
Welcome, everyone.
It's so awesome to have you today.
Yeah, it's good to be here.
Yeah?
It's nice to be here.
Wangala!
Christ nailed to a cross. There's something in the life of Abraham that points us towards Christ.
And so Jesus is fully God.
We're fully accepted.
Have you been finding Grow over the past couple of weeks, Mpho?
I love it.
The Google Classroom.
Chicken fit is delicacy for so many people.
Community around the table.
Yes. Putting more vegetables in our menu through the week.
And enjoy praising.
Good evening and welcome to Sunday Night Live. It is so good to have you with us again. And thank you so much for tuning in. And thank you for sharing this link with everybody you know, or at least one person, because it's Sunday evening. And I know that nobody's really got many plans on a Sunday evening. So people do. I'm not saying you don't have a social life, but share the link.
So my name is Jan Ben, in case you were wondering. It's so good to see you.
And I'm apparently Kevin. And so here we are, Jan Ben.
We forgot our manners. We apologize. But it is really good to see you. We are grateful that you have been sharing this link, that you do participate in the comment section. We enjoy hearing from you.
Absolutely.
And it's honestly been a privilege to do this with you.
And we've had a fantastic day. We'll tell you a bit more about what we got up to today, right at the end of the show. But last week, we just went back over a whole, all the weeks and months that
it's now.
Yeah, that Sunday Night Live is done. And man, we picked the funniest bits and the most awkward scenes. And what was your favorite?
Oh, Kev, it has to be the one where I kicked RJ in the face. Honestly, it has to be. It wasn't caught on camera where I actually kicked him, but I still feel bad about it. But it's definitely, that was my favorite moment.
I missed that moment. And I wish I hadn't. I wished I had seen you actually kick him in the face, because that's just hilarious, and that's what good friends do. RJ, we love you. I'm sorry that you got kicked, but we can't wait for you to come back to Sunday Night Live. Him and his wife have just had a little baby boy, and man, he's such a delight and a blessing.
Yeah.
But and I don't know if it was my favorite moment. Not so much. It was 5 seconds of absolute awkwardness, if that's a word. 5 seconds in front of a camera in a moment like that is about as long as the year 2020 has been.
So true, huh? But saying that, I still can't believe we're actually in November. And like you've said to me previously, like it's a couple of weeks and then it's Christmas. It's
Christmas.
Yeah, it honestly, it doesn't feel real.
All the stores have Christmas decorations in them.
This is true.
But anyway, we're not here to talk about Christmas or last week. We have got a beautiful, beautiful story this evening.
Yeah.
And who are we? Whose story is it?
It is Bianca's story, and it is one of authenticity, one of being vulnerable, and one of just saying yes to Jesus.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So good.
But I just want to let you know, if you're watching this and you go, well, I come from a great home, and not a broken home, and it was cool growing up, and I did all the good things or did the right things, if that's something that is even a thing. But I just want to tell you that your story matters.
Yeah.
And even if something was done to you that is terrible, or you did something terrible. So even if you came from a background of like a big drug lord or a gang member, or whatever, from a hit squad or something, we just want to tell you that your story matters, not from what you've done, not your past, but what makes headlines in heaven is actually the decision to follow Jesus.
Yeah.
And every single time we say yes to following Jesus, it makes headlines in heaven. And that's what matters. It's when we say yes to a better, preferred future with Jesus, walking in step with him. So I just want to say that your story matters to us, and it matters to God, no matter what you've been through, where you come from, or what life has thrown your way, or what privilege you've lived in. Your story matters when you say yes to Jesus. And tonight's story is just Bianca just saying yes to Jesus and then just saying yes again. And it's beautiful. It's such a beautiful story.
Yeah, I'm so excited to hear it, and I trust you are as well. And now we're heading over that way.
Well, yes, good evening and welcome to Story Time. I am here with Bianca Klein. Yes, it's true. It's so good to have you with us. I'm excited.
Thanks for inviting me.
I'm excited for your story. I'm excited to hear what you have to share. You have a film company.
Yes.
So let's do a little bit about you, because that's always helpful for people, you know,
so that
set
they
you
know
up.
who this person is.
Yeah, because otherwise it's like you're sitting on a couch and you are. So
why
Bianca,
should I listen to you?
You have a film company called Truvai Film.
Yes.
See, I got it right.
Nice.
I had to like practice it a little bit.
Nice.
And you do most of like the videography side of things.
Yes, I do videography, and then recently I partnered with my husband Kent.
Ooh,
and
so
he
it's
now
like a
runs,
double partnership.
Yes,
Like,
and now he runs the photography department.
Okay, and he takes incredible photos as
He
well.
does. But he also gets clients because he's just a nice person.
That is true. He's a connector.
He is.
He just like he's good with people, so he just
So
connects.
we show up, and then I'm like, and then he's like, hi, how are you? And then
He's
he
a-
introduces me, and I'm like, hello.
You would have probably seen Kent if you've watched Church Online, because
Yeah.
he has been hosting, and he was on SNL also at one stage.
He's
Did
the
a
guy
really-
with the biceps.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's a pretty solid way to describe it. So you actually, though, you had a baby during lockdown level 5, like
did.
hard lockdown.
I did.
His name is Caleb Basil Klein.
Yes.
See, Klein, I got it again. I just had
Nice.
to like remind myself. I always want to say Klein, and I don't know why. But what was that like? I mean, level 5 was hard lockdown. I remember like it's not like we could bring you meals, or you know, people could visit you. Like, what was that like? Was there a disconnect? Was it difficult?
Yeah. I mean, everything's harder in lockdown. Like, labor was harder, everything. Like, no, I'm kidding.
Labor is so much harder during level 5. Like, I wouldn't know, but you know.
So I think leading up to it, I was pretty nervous, because I think that, you know, it being my first baby, you're already like terrified of what's it going to be like.
What's gonna happen?
And now you're like going out to the store and everyone's wearing masks and everyone's like just, you know, there was just this kind of anxiety of what's coming in the world in general. And then people look at you like, oh, shame, you're pregnant. And you're like, I am pregnant. But I think I think there were certain things that were good and certain things that I think we just had to grieve a little bit. Like, one thing that was great was that so many people in our community actually just dropped off like 2 weeks worth of meals before lockdown even started.
Amazing.
And, so we were actually just really taken care of well, even though people couldn't be there. I think that one of the big things before I went into labor was knowing whether or not Kent would be able to join in hospital.
Because that was at a stage it was like no, yes, maybe, like not
I was
sure.
just, I am not going to be in labor by myself.
I was like, I'd be like, my husband will be with me.
Like, I don't care what the law says. I will not. But he ended up being able to join me for the labor part, and then I had to, afterwards he couldn't visit. But it was good at least that he could join, and that, you know, people could help out in the way that they could.
Yeah.
Luckily, I was very, what do you call it, overly prepared.
Okay.
So I was like,
Because you are
everything
that
was ready.
person, like
Yeah.
you said earlier, you
So-
like detail,
yeah.
you got it, there's a checklist, like
So
sorted.
everything was ready, and then Ken's like, listen, like, we don't need to be this prepared, it's really fine. And then they announced lockdown, and I'm just like, you see, Holy Spirit, I knew, like.
You're welcome.
So we were ready, at least before lockdown was announced, because I think Caleb was like 6 weeks old before we were even allowed to buy baby stuff. So, because it wasn't an essential. I don't know how old he was. But
How is it not an essential now that you
it was
say
like
that?
a couple of weeks before people were like, my baby needs clothes, and then they made it an essential, but luckily we were fine. But yeah, it was hard. I think the biggest thing just that one of the big things of having a kid is you want to show them off.
Yeah.
Like, you want to walk around.
That's like the natural.
At the store, and a stranger stops and you're like, look how beautiful your baby is. And you're like, I know.
I mean that.
And now there was none of that. I think it was 2.5 weeks. He was 2.5 weeks old before any family members met him.
Sure.
So that sucked, because I think that like you see how beautiful he is, and no one else gets to see it. And I think that was hard. Like, the Kents now are kind of like the only ones who get to see all the small milestones. Because people, even now that things have relaxed a bit, people aren't as people still aren't quite as social as they were before.
Yeah.
So I think we had to grieve that a little bit and just be like, that's sad and it sucks, but it's okay because better seasons will come.
And I think that's like an important thing of what people spoke down. It's just like there have been grieving processes in lockdown and off the back of it. And I think even now there'll be instances where people kind of go, actually, like I didn't realize it, but there was a grievance there, or there was something that let it down. But you and Kent are actually really big community people, right? Like you said, like you're both quite social, like you're people. So maybe like, why is community important to you guys?
So I think for different reasons actually. So Kent is very extroverted and I am very not. And I think for him, he's just always been a people person. He's always loved people, just naturally.
Yeah.
And I think for me, it became a thing because of church. I think just growing up, I grew up very alone. I think I was very, very isolated for like the first 18 years of my life. And it became important to me. Like it was something that I think God just redeemed in my life, that he brought about community. And once I had it, it just really mattered to me. And I think also because I kind of spent a lot of my life on the outskirts, when I see people on the outskirts, I'm like, get in here. So I think we have a very kind of, like we never tell people, no, there's not room. Just come and we'll make room. We'll make a plan. So I think we play well off of one another because Ken pushes me out of my comfort zone to allow more people in, and God does the rest to make me see like the value of community and how important it is.
That's amazing. And I mean, like, it's not the easiest thing to do community and do life with people, but it's probably one of the most rewarding things. I think like when you get into it. So tell us a little bit then about, so you're saying now like you grew up on the outskirts a little bit, like tell us a little bit of your story. Where did you grow up in Centurion?
I did.
Just learned that.
Centurion,
So tell us a little bit about your story.
So grew up in Centurion, stayed there my whole life until I got married and moved to Pretoria. So I, like I said, grew up very alone. My parents got married very young, and so by the time they were 25, they had all 3 kids. And so they were kind of just like scrambling to survive for the most part. And so I think they weren't able to be there for us in a very big capacity, like emotionally. So they would try and make sure that we were kind of taken care of, that we were surviving, but there wasn't always much more than that. And I think that my sister and my brother were very extroverted.
Are they older? Where do you?
I'm the middle kid.
Okay, middle child.
Kid. So older
surprises.
sister, younger brother, and while they're very extroverted, they would kind of like go and fill in all the gaps emotionally with people, and I just kind of like further would self-isolate and withdrew because I didn't know how to engage with people at all. Because like small things like I wasn't used to like being asked how my day was or anything like that. It was very, very lonely, and so I think I didn't know how to engage with people much at all and even then when I did join church later on, I think even then like I kind of got roped into like leadership things, and it took a long time before it was more than just leadership and mentorship, before it became like God taught me what relationship was. But then I was about 12 years old. I was very, very, like I said, lonely, but I think I also felt since a very young age, I felt like I couldn't let people in because they couldn't see the real me. And I think, like I know you know a little bit about my story, but just like how shame was a very, very big thing for me when I was younger. And I think like I first started experiencing like my earliest memory of shame is like since like 4 years old, because I think that they were, I don't know, I only later kind of figured like it being a generational curse thing, but because also I think a lot of people in my family, like in my generation, were infected in some way. But since about the age of 4, I really struggled with lust, and I didn't know what sex was or sexuality was, but I just felt like sex was this evil thing that had stolen something from me without me even like knowing what it was. And like it would just, I just had this kind of awareness of it, and it would just kind of get worse and worse until I remember like 8 years old, I would not be able to like walk past a member of the opposite sex without like picturing sex with them. And I remember like I hated myself so much because no matter how hard I tried, I couldn't change myself. Like I couldn't change it. And I remember like now already being kind of a pretty lonely, isolated person. I remember like being like 5 years old telling myself like, you can never let anyone see who you really are because they will despise you. And, you know, like carrying that kind of shame at that young age doesn't exactly allow for a very, like a happy childhood. So I think I grew up very just, like I started struggling with depression when I was like 7 years old.
Sure.
And that continued until I was about 21. But
there's a but.
But
I think just like before you carry on, I think what's beautiful is I think a lot of people can actually relate to that. And I think especially like for me as a woman, as a young girl, you know, it was not something that was ever spoken about. So like you say, like when there's no light cast into it, like you don't know any better. So immediately you just want to almost like retract more and more into the dark. And it was something where it's just like, that's why I love like Sunday Night Live. I love that we're having conversations around things that are actually really important, because I think if a lot of people spoke about it, it would actually be way more common than we think. But I think because, especially when you're young, you're almost like, I'm an anomaly. It's just me. This is not normal. Like, I'm a horrendous individual type of thing. But in the vulnerability and the authenticity of it, like there's light shed on it, which is amazing. So thank you for, you know, being vulnerable and being willing to share, because I do think as other people hear that, they'll go, okay, you know what, it wasn't just me, or it's not just me. So you said but
when I was so I encountered God when I was 12, like started of grade 7, and I didn't like Christians.
To the Christians.
So we would go like once every 2-3 months. We'd like go to one Sunday morning like service or whatever, and I didn't really like what I saw in Christians, and it wasn't until I encountered the God of Christians that I kind of changed my mind. But I was invited to, because my sister's best friend, she became a Christian, and then she kind of started inviting us all to church, and I'm like, I don't like Christians, I don't want to go.
Stop inviting me.
And eventually I joined one evening service at like the youth service, and like I sat there, and it was the first time ever, because everything before, I looked at the world around me, I looked at people around me, and it just seemed to me like people were just trying to get through the day. Like no one seemed like they were truly happy to be alive. And I sat there and I just felt like there was something different. And for the first time ever, I just clearly felt the presence of God. Like I clearly felt the presence of the Holy Spirit, and I knew for a fact that I'd felt something real there, and I think that was like a big shift for me. And from that moment on, I kind of like, you know, when you go for like an altar call, but then you go like 17 times just to make sure.
Am I just checking I'm saved? I'm saved.
Like what if they said a wrong word in the prayer? Like I'm just making sure.
I think I did like 4 or 5 at least, like just to like, you know, double check. And if you went to a different church and there was an altar call, it was like, you know, at this time, like I should just like, you know, go forward.
But so from the moment that I gave my life to the Lord, then God started shifting big things in me. And I think like immediately, because I didn't have a social life, like I was very lonely, and so I immediately kind of just started going to church camps and conferences and services and anything that I could to kind of get my hands on more of God. And at one of the camps we went on, then we just had this evening session where they made like a big bonfire. And the pastor leading it was like, if there's anything that you legitimately struggle with, sin-wise or whatever, that you write it on a piece of paper and you pray over it and you chuck it in the fire. And I wrote on there like lust, you know, because this thing had been just this horrible just thorn in my side that I, you know, couldn't do anything about no matter how hard I tried. Like I couldn't in my own strength do anything. And so I wrote on this little piece of paper, like, lust, you know, like,
Yeah.
don't let anyone
Nobody
see
looks.
it. And then
Those moments where you're just like, okay, it's even in there, like, I don't want to know what you're writing. Don't look at mine.
Yeah.
Like,
And prayed over it, and I threw it in the fire, and it was gone. Like, just like amazingly, I just never struggled with it again. And obviously, like, I put certain boundaries in place throughout my life, just because when God gave me purity, it meant a lot.
Yeah.
Like, it meant a lot to me. So I was kind of just like safeguarding it, like. Like, I didn't really date or anything. Like, my first kiss was with Kent.
oh, wow.
When I was like 24, and people were like, "Oh, it's because you're so holy and amazing." No, it's because I didn't want to awaken any sleeping dragons.
Come on,
like,
that's
I
so
was
good.
like, God's given me this, and I want to treasure it and protect it, and I don't want to awaken. I don't want to awaken like passion before it's due, you know.
Because then to unawaken it and put it back to sleep
Yeah.
is like that
Yeah.
much more difficult.
Exactly. But yeah, so that was, I think, one aspect of it. But I think the thing with shame is that long after the sin is dealt with, shame still lingers. And it wasn't until I was after high school I did a gap year course called Year of Your Life.
Oh yeah,
And,
year of your life.
and
There it is.
one of the things when I was in there, God was like, he brought it up, because every now and then I'd like remember about it, and I'd just be like, no, like push it down
as
like,
far as
I've dealt
possible.
with this. Why do I have to think about it? You know. And then God just brought it up, and he's like, we need to deal with this now.
Yeah.
You know. He's like, because like your past is still a part of who you are. You know, even though God redeems it. I think carrying shame about your past means that you can't properly claim what God's going to redeem.
Sure.
And so he kind of just like brought it up, and he's like, we need to deal with this. So take it to your leaders, bring it into the light. And I think Ephesians 5, it talks about just bringing things into the light.
Yeah.
And so I brought it to my elders, and we prayed through it. And just the fact that I could actually be vulnerable and bring it forward and like expose it in the light, it just made the enemy lose like any control and power over it, you know. But just the fact that I could be honest and be vulnerable and be seen, and I was still loved by people, was amazing. And I think that then, the next year, I felt like God wanted me to share that part of my story with some of the students, and it was very difficult for me, because I was like, but now I've dealt with it, you know, like why do I have to tell other people about it? And I just felt like, I think, like he was saying earlier, how vulnerability, when we're vulnerable, we create a stepping stone for other people to be able to be braver than they were before. And I think it was, when I shared it, then for the next 2 days, I just saw, like, again and again and again, like you share, and then you feel so vulnerable and so exposed, and you're just like, now forget
you want
about
to
me,
retract, like,
leave
no.
me.
Yeah.
And then for the next 2 days, like, all the students, the year kind of starts off with like, one of the first things you do is you share your coldest moment, where you kind of, they start off the year, people just being very vulnerable about something that happened in their life, and just the way that you can bring it forward and people still love you and support you and pray with you through it, kind of sets a very good tone for the year. And so I kind of shared that, and for the next 2 days people were just like, it's like Bianca said, you know, like when Bianca said this, and like, and every time like someone said that, it felt like they were like stepping on me, and I'm like, oh Lord, this sucks, it hurts. And he's like, but can you see what they can do now because of what you did, you know?
That's
And
so good.
and I think it's why it's important for us to claim our stories, like, because I think that when we can like it's not who we are now, but it shows what God did, and it can give courage to others that he can do the same.
Yeah, come on.
Yeah.
And that's, I think, the beautiful thing. I think shame can be a silent killer, you know, like, and definitely suffer alone.
Yeah.
And even just thinking of the back of like this year in 2020, you know, that thing of like owning your story, but I almost had the sense of like, there are people that have been in lockdown, but even out of that, there's like, they've been alone, they've been isolated, and even whatever happened during lockdown, like there could be shame and there could be guilt and there could be things that have been locked down with that.
Yeah.
And just knowing actually to share it, to bring it to the light, like God does something in those moments, you know, like he is the light, and that's the beautiful thing. And I think our stories are powerful. Like that's why we wanted to do story time, because we actually went, you know, like our stories are powerful because it's the same God. You know, like that's the same God who it was like freed you from lust.
Yeah.
He's the same God. Like if he did it for you, he can do it
Yeah.
for someone else. And I love that thing of just like owning your story. And then you met Kent.
Yes.
Did you guys meet at Year of Your Life? I can't remember if that
No,
was
so we met at the church where I did Year of Your Life.
Ah, there we go.
Yeah, we met there, and we were not each other's types at all, actually. Our pastor kind of, like, did a little bit of...
Set you up.
Yeah, so we were serving together for a long time. We were friends for, like, 2 years, and she eventually just kind of, like, put us, like, in leadership positions together, and she's like, can you guys figure it out? And eventually we just had to like organize a bunch of things together and constantly have leaders meetings, and eventually our leaders meetings just got longer and longer and started like happening at restaurants and stuff, and eventually we're just like, this kind of works.
Yeah, I was like I think
this
it's
wasn't what I was
working.
expecting, but this really works. But I actually just want to touch on what you said earlier about people being in lockdown, like even outside of lockdown. I think that, you know, there's that scripture about how the thief comes to steal and kill and destroy. And I think that so many people are like, when they give their life to the Lord, then it's like, great, I'm free, I'm going to heaven. But they don't recognize that God wants to reclaim and redeem what the enemy stole from them in the first place. And I think that freedom is to so many people this like elusive thing, like, I'm free because I'm going to heaven.
Yeah.
But Christ came that we can have freedom here and now, in this present day. And that he wants to bring freedom, whether it's from depression, whether it's from lust, whether it's from addiction. Like, he wants to bring actual freedom. And not just in the sense you don't struggle with it anymore, but that you can actually be free from shame as well. Yeah.
That's so good.
But
I'm
yeah.
ready. I'm like, preach. Okay, let's go. Let's do it. But it's so true, and I absolutely love that. I wanted to ask if you still have moments where you struggle with depression.
So for me, the depression thing is, like, I think God... so I didn't tell people about it really because I think I've been in a bunch of different kind of Christian environments, and often I see people meaning well, but speaking outside of what they'll know, and they'll kind of just be like, oh, well, if you struggle from depression, you're not really saved, you know.
Oh, yeah.
You haven't really experienced God. And I mean, Paul talks about how no matter how many times he's prayed about this thorn, it's still there, you know. And I'd love to see like a Christian today telling Paul, well, Paul, you haven't really given your life to God yet.
Yeah, tell us, like, yeah.
And I think sometimes the process of sanctification is a lifelong process, and I think that some things take longer than others. And for me, like, I was a Christian for 9 years before God kind of brought like real breakthrough in freedom from that. And it was just the 1 year he's like, we're going to deal with this. And it was weird because I think sometimes when you're stuck in depression, it feels like you're stuck in a maze where there is no way
There's no out,
of.
yeah.
And you kind of just need to cling to God's truth, like what his word says. I think it's sometimes like truth is like a lifeboat in the midst of our storm, like where everything around you is crazy, but you're just holding on to this one thing, but God says. And that year he just, like, I can't even tell you exactly he did this, like it was just, he did this and this and this and this, and somehow he brought it together, that he helped me to kind of deal with like some of the source issues of it. I think for me it was a big thing of just purpose and of my worth and stuff that he just needed to deal with. And I mean, like, one of the random things that like during that year that he did, that I remember so clearly, is one of the nights at church afterwards. It was like a response moment where I don't even know what it was about. Like, you know, when they're like, if you feel like you want to come forward and just be in the Lord's presence, and then the worship band just keeps going and people are leaving, and there's just like people hanging around for like an hour. And I went forward for whatever it was, and there was this little girl next to me, and I don't know where her parents were, but she was about 6 years old, and she was sitting next to me, and she was just crying before the Lord. And I looked over at her, and something in me just broke, because, like, and God just said to me, he's like, you need to grieve the little girl that you were.
Sure.
Because like, the innocence I didn't have as a child, you know, and the childhood that I didn't have, he's like, you need to grieve that little girl so that you can claim her, because she's part of who you are. And I just cried before the Lord for like a year. But an hour.
I was like, a year.
I cried before him for a year, no, for like an hour. I just cried, and God just, he shifted something in me. Like, he just kind of brought healing in that area that night. But what were we talking about?
I was so into the story now. I'm thinking like, wait.
Oh yeah, you asked me, do I
Oh,
still like
struggle with
sometimes struggle?
depression? Yeah.
So I think sometimes every now and then, like there'll just be like, if I'm going through a really rough season, that I'll just kind of feel like these lingering things of it coming up.
Yeah.
And I think then it's just practically walking through it. Like I know God's dealt with the source things, and sometimes it's just like you wake up and you're like, I don't want to get out of bed. And it's like, get out of bed, Bianca. Good, because now
Well
go
done,
for a
yeah.
run, because it's good for you. Now go take a shower, have some breakfast, get dressed, like, you know, and I think sometimes it's just kind of practically walking through it and like taking it to the Lord again and again and again. And I think sometimes we have to repeatedly bring stuff and lay it at the foot of the cross. Like, who said it? I can't remember which writer said it, but they spoke about just how when we're climbing up a mountain, but it kind of circles
like a
around
spiral,
the mountain, and it's like every time you get to the side, you're like, I've been here before, but you're in a higher place. And so I think every time, like when God walks us through stuff, it's like, but I've been here before, but you're not in the same place. Like God's brought you higher, and you just need to keep going and keep going.
Yeah, I love that, and it speaks of like the journey. I think so often it's like we look to the destination and we think, well, that's where we want to be, or that's where it is, but actually, like our lives are a journey towards, and like you say, even sanctification, like it's a journey. And even sometimes it feels like 2 steps forward and a step back, or whatever it might be. Like I love that God is in that with us. You know, like He's in the journey. And like recognizing triggers, I think like that's a big thing of just going, actually, like I can recognize that I'm in this space. And I think having people, like that's our community for me, is just like having people around you to just like stop and go, you know what, like I can recognize, like for me it's anxiety, I can recognize like I'm getting super anxious. And okay, like there's certain people where I'm like, I'm just gonna tell them. And the minute I like actually say it or recognize it, like something changes. But I also love those moments like you spoke about where it's just like God does something and you can't like pinpoint it, you can't like this isn't that, but like you start to begin to realize that a shift is happening. Which is beautiful. So
like I love that this segment is called like story time, because I think Donald Miller says like how the same things that make for a good story or would make for a good life. And I agree with that, because I think like if you look at some of the kind of processes that writers follow, like there's this one process where they basically follow 15 beats, that they call it, to write like a good script or whatever.
This is good.
And like follow these 15 beats and you'll have like a good story. And it basically starts with you set up the character, and then you introduce like, it's the catalyst, like you introduce like some kind of obstacle, like some kind of struggle that the character needs to face. Because let's face it, no one is interested in a story about somebody who has a perfect life.
Perfection,
and you just get to sit there for 2 hours and watch how happy they are and how nothing ever happens. That's not great all the time, you know. No one wants to see that. People want to see a character evolve, like have to overcome something. And so you kind of follow the character arc of they struggle with something, they need to overcome something, and you see them do it in the story. And these beats kind of go like there's Act 1, Act 2, Act 3. But Act 2 is kind of like the struggle. And 3 of the beats are so funny. It's like the last 3 beats before you enter Act 3, which is like the resolve, the victory. And those last 3 beats are the bad guys close in, and then all is lost, and then the dark night of the soul, which is like,
wow, it's like even
like it's this horrible, like the dark night of the soul of like everything has failed right before Act 3 comes in. And I think God does the same thing in our lives. Like trials are good for us. Like our struggles are good for us because they make us more Christ-like. And even though we don't see it, when we get to Act 3, we look back and we're like, that's what God was doing. He was in that moment. He was in that dark night of the soul. He was there, and He was doing a good work in me. And I think that, and those kind of character arcs, those beats, repeat themselves throughout our lives. Because there are so many things that we need to overcome, and so many areas in our lives that God needs to bring redemption.
You're an incredible woman. I'm just like, I'm sitting here and I'm like, I'm so encouraged, and I'm like, you've put courage in my heart.
That's cool.
So I suppose like the last thing I'd maybe just ask you and just say like, maybe there is someone out there who's sitting in their room alone, and maybe they're thinking, okay, God can't meet me here, you know, or like I'm too far gone, or, you know, maybe in a prison of some sorts of shame or whatever it might be. Like, what would you, if you could say something to your younger self, or if you could say something to that person, like, what would your encouragement be? Maybe you want to, I don't know, talk to the look at the camera.
I think two things. I think one, that God can do what he says he's going to do. Like, don't read the words and think they're empty and think, that applies to others but not to me. It applies to you. Like, when he says he can bring freedom, when he says that he has a good story to write for you, he means it. Those words are true. And find yourself a safe space where you can bring things into the light, and where you can be vulnerable, and where you can find that not only is God still going to love you, but that he's going to put people in your life who are going to love you too. Like, I think that thing that I felt like I'm never going to be able to be fully, like, known by my husband, like, that's not true. Like, Kent knows me. He knows me, like, through and through. And it's in that vulnerability that I think that the most beautiful love is found. But, and secondly, I think, like, trust God's process. Like, trust the story that he's writing. Because when you look back, you're going to see why. And you're going to have courage for the next season, because you're going to see that what he did there, he's going to do it again. He's going to do it again and again and again. So trust the process. God knows what he's doing. He's the best author. Like,
I love that. I love it. Like, I hope that you've enjoyed this. I've definitely enjoyed hearing your story, and it is like,
I've still got coffee left.
Yeah, well done. I literally just finished mine. I was like, that was a good, like, nice timing. But thank you for sharing, and thank you for being vulnerable and sharing your story with us on Storytime. And I do think that, I just want to encourage you to keep sharing your story.
Cool.
Because there is power in our stories. Amazing. So I think now we're actually going to cross over to a little bit of fun and games.
Yay.
So guys, over to you.
Good evening and welcome to tonight's game. It is called Guess the Movie Title. But wait, we will be using emojis. And you too can play at home, so do not forget to put your answers in the comments section. All right, you will have 10 seconds to figure out these emojis. And let's rumble!
Still don't know what this is.
You gotta start guessing.
Pink Firebook. Pink Firebook. Fireproof.
I'll give you a hint.
Okay.
Teenagers.
Ninja.
Girl teenagers.
Brats.
Have any of you
Barbie.
at home got it?
Barbie.
Let's give them the answer.
Oh.
That answer is shit.
Next.
Palm dance.
Hawaii film.
Palm dance.
It's not Grease Lightning.
Oh, it's a tropical musical.
It's a musical.
It's a musical. Is it?
It's based in Los Angeles.
Los Angeles.
Bit of jazz in there.
La La Land.
Yes! And we have a winner, La La Land. Next question.
All right.
Finding Nemo.
She beat you to the punch. Next question.
So close. Ratatouille.
One point to Journey's 3 points. Next question.
Titanic. No.
Journey takes it again. Next question.
Oh.
It won many awards.
This is
Knocked Up. No.
He's a runner.
He's a runner.
She's pregnant.
She's pregnant, and there's a guitar involved. He's a
They're
runner.
quite young.
They're very young.
We're in the movie. Not anymore. It's been some years. Any guesses?
Nope, none.
One guess is knocked up. Any of you at home getting any of this? No? You can't help us? Give them the answer.
Oh,
Now
man.
it makes sense.
I haven't watched that in like 100 years.
Next.
I don't even watch that movie, actually.
It's a black baby.
What?
It's a
Hansel and Gretel.
Christmas tree.
It's a young man.
The gingerbread man.
No. It's a young man,
It's
a
a young
Christmas
man.
tree,
Why is
and
he
a
so
house. Some may even call it a home.
Home Alone.
Bing, we got it! Yay!
Random. It's just
Next. I need some guesses. Come on.
like money.
Money. Go on.
Italia. Oh,
Come on. Come on, Shivani. Beat Chris.
Italian job.
No.
Damn it! I thought it was that one.
It's close.
Italian. The people with that's big like the mafia.
Yes. Who do we worship?
The
God.
Godfather.
Godfather.
Chris has
I
got
gave
it.
you all the clues.
Aptly
That's
named
not
it.
fair.
And our last one.
What?
What is that last thing?
It's a volcano.
It's a young man.
Lord of the Rings.
Boom!
Yeah, so I gave that one. Yes. The rings of the Lord.
Well done, contestants. Over to you,
did
Jan
well.
Ben.
Thank you. Almost Mike voice over guy. Really appreciate you. You did a great job.
Mike isn't here tonight. He's away. Good, and it's good that he's resting.
Yeah.
He's away. But anyway, we had a fantastic day today, didn't we? It was
100%.
amazing. Church outside, everybody together, worshiping together. What was
Yeah.
your favorite?
Oh, I just love worshiping with a lot more people. Like, there's something special about having
There
a lot
is.
more people
There really
coming
is.
together. Like, it's great doing it in the Power of 10 homes, but there's something special where a bigger community comes
Yeah.
together and worships together. So
Absolutely.
It was so good.
It was
I
good.
loved it.
The weather played its part, and well, it played its part. And the foot golf was great. Playing around the foot golf, I had a 4-ball, and it was fantastic.
Guys, if you haven't played foot golf yet,
You've got to come and try it.
It is
Give
so
a
much
go.
fun.
But it wasn't about the foot golf for
Yeah,
me.
no.
It was about people coming together that haven't been together for 6 or 7 or 8 months.
Yeah.
I've lost count.
Yeah,
But
it's
we
been a
all
while.
came together and we worshiped one person, and that was Jesus. And
yeah.
we sang our hearts out. We communied till we had to go home. And it was just amazing to gather as people and to worship God together. It was absolutely fantastic.
Definitely. Yeah. Guys, we're so glad you joined us tonight. We're so glad you participated. We're so glad you shared the link with your friends.
Yes, thank you
yeah.
for sharing that link.
Yeah, you don't always see the impact of just taking one step of obedience and sharing it with someone else. You don't see necessarily what the fruit that has.
Absolutely.
But we just want to honor you for that. We want to thank you and keep on doing that.
Yeah, come on. And guys, next week, or guys and girls, next week, we will see you same time, same place. And we look forward to having the privilege of taking up half an hour of your time. Thanks for tuning in, and have a good evening.
Cheers.